So hello everyone, thanks very much for joining us for this week's Thursday 30. We've got Lex Lang, who's Deputy Head at Caterham School, and he's going to share with us how RileyBot AI can support and extend SEND learners in primary and secondary settings. So thank you, Lex, and over to you. And also, if you have any questions for Lex, he's happy to answer them during the session, but you might want to just type it into the chat and then he can answer at the end. All right then. Thanks, Lex.
Thanks, Annabelle. So hello, as Annabelle said, I'm Lex Lang. I'm the Deputy Head for Innovation and Partnerships at Caterham Prep. I'm also an advisor for IAPS, the Prep Schools organisation, and do some other bits and bobs. A lot of my job is to advise schools on innovation and how to move things forward for their children. That's not all about technology, but obviously a lot of it is, and increasingly in the last couple of years, it's also about AI. So I'm going to be talking to you about that. Specifically today, I'm talking to you about RileyBot. RileyBot is a thing that was made by a company called Sphinx AI. I don't work for them, but they were spun out from our school, and I'll get into that as well. I suppose I'll get into it now. I guess for a bit of context, once we saw ChatGPT and the like coming along, we started thinking about what was preventing that from being a thing that kids could use. And obviously, particularly I'm in the primary age range, and there were reasons around safeguarding, there were reasons around oversight, there were reasons around concerns about plagiarism and intellectual laziness and things like that. And we talked about what would it take to be able to tackle all of those and make them safe. And that came down to it would need to be several people's full-time jobs to do this properly. And so Sphinx was established to go and do that, so they could have machine learning engineers and app developers and a legal team, and then go and work with the AI companies to make sure there was something that was safe and which provided the overviews that we needed and met the criteria that schools actively need. And what we found is that a lot of that, as with so many things, is especially if you've got a mind towards SEND, and we're really lucky that our SENCO at our school is, again, she's brilliant, Catherine Sharp, some of you may know her already, that we always have that in mind. I went to a thing that Miles Pilling presented. He does stuff for, I think it's Clicker, but he was talking about sort of good SEND teaching being, and good SEND technology being essential for some and beneficial for all. And I think that's the way that we have to approach all these things. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a mini history lesson and then talk practicality and see if I can get through it in time. As Annabelle said, if you have any questions, do shout out. I will try to keep roughly to time, but otherwise we can absolutely come back to things at the end, assuming I haven't talked for far too long, which is usually my style. So assuming my slideshow works, I want to start with a quote that I saw Anthony Seldon give this was at the first AI conference I went to, which was like, coming up on 2 years ago now. But he made a really good point, and this is the elephant in the room with so much of education at the moment, and it's not even about AI, is the education system in the UK and the world to a large extent, but has really not changed significantly in the last 100 years. A lot of that has been because there hasn't been an alternative. But actually, if we stop and we look, and lots of things are because they ain't broken, and we teach the same way we always have because that's the way we've always taught. But actually, when we think about the way the education system was set up, it was to teach children, students, specific skills that they would need for the world of work, really. And the English and the maths and the other things they learn were going to be directly useful in many workplaces. We have been at the point for quite a long time now where virtually none of what they learn in school is actually directly beneficial in any job. And the reasons they now do it are metaphorical. We do that stuff because you need it for an exam, and that opens doors for you. And even once we've cut the number of exams or exams change, well, it's essentially character forming. But actually, let's drill down into what that really means. That was me attempting to transition to the next page and it not happening. Okay, so a couple of little things I want to show you are two things I go back to a lot and update every year. Is the World Economic Forum publishes a report every year. This is about skills for the workplace. So they go and interview 1,000 different companies all around the world and ask them what they are looking for in employees. And for the last many years, it's looked pretty much like this. I don't know if you can see it okay. Is that a bit fuzzy on your screens? Somebody do feel free to unmute if you can read that.
I can read it.
Well,
it's faded, but you know, it's quite hard to read maybe, but I can read it.
Perfect, thank you. I will talk you through it. So essentially what it's saying is that, well, interestingly, for the first time this year, reading, writing and maths have dropped out of the top 20, which is galling in the education sector. But actually, as some quite unhappy teachers have pointed out to me, yeah, but look at the top 10. Analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility, leadership, creative thinking, metacognition, motivation, self-awareness, technology literacy, empathy, listening, curiosity. All of those are things we teach all the time. And I say, great. Do the children know we teach them that? And even if they do know, how much of it is actually the learning objective? They're often things that kind of happen in the background, happen in the margins, happen as part of a well-being thing, but actually they're critically important. These are the active things. Now, it's not to say that reading and writing aren't important, because actually those top 10 things all come within what we do with our core subject stuff. But the reading, writing and maths are kind of baseline things. Yet, this is a thing that we need to be really aware of, particularly again with children who might have significant learning needs. Those can be massive barriers. And they can be barriers that prevent or hinder the development of those really critical ones at the top as well, because they can spend so long addressing the technical sides of creating the work that they're not getting to spend the time really using those higher order thinking skills that we want them and need them to be developing. The other smaller one, I don't know if you can see me waving the mouse around, so I'll try and put a laser pointer on it. This is from the Education Endowment Foundation's Teacher Toolkit. It is wonderful. They go and review the literature around academic studies that have been carried out in education, and they update that constantly. And again, you can sort that by impact. So this down the side is impact on learning, and although it can be very hard for you to see, in the top 10, it's starting at things that add. So we've got metacognition and self-evaluation. I think it's pretty fuzzy even on mine. But what that's saying is that adds 7 months of relative progress if you're teaching that properly and it's well embedded. And reading and comprehension strategies and oracy and feedback and mastery learning and peer interaction. All of those things have huge impacts up here. It is noteworthy that academic streaming and ability streaming is features in the things that subtract progress, generally speaking, which is interesting, but a separate thing for a separate day. But the point is here, we've always been doing a lot of these things, but they've sort of been implied. And I think it's sometimes something we need to do more about. And it's something that we can use technology to help with. So let's look at those barriers. Those things where children with learning needs, and obviously learning needs it's a broad spread. Like there is no such thing as one particular, that you will know more than me, how many different barriers there can be, but also opportunities within that, just different ways that children can approach learning, I suppose. But there can be barriers that particularly make standard school teaching more difficult. Processing time, barriers to communication, could that be taken in through reading or listening? It could be the speaking, it could be sharing, it could be the executive function and processing, the cognitive load demands that we put on children all the time. I am aware that I'm putting a pretty high cognitive load on everyone right now, and I'd like to apologize. There are a lot of words on the screen and I'm speaking really fast. Neither of these things is particularly helpful. Although there is an AI transcribing this for us, which is quite helpful in its own way. By all means, take the transcript later, dump it into an AI and ask it to summarize it. It's really helpful. But it can help. So some of the tools that are becoming available now can do adaptive teaching. It's something we should all be doing, obviously, but we can individually adaptively teach. We can individually produce something that is tailored to each individual student. We can find ways to make things more accessible, and we can make the children feel more independent. And I think that's really important. I'm going to go over a couple of things that aren't RileyBot and then come back to RileyBot, because actually, again, I'm not Sphinx, but I think it's an important product that fits into a pattern of things. So there are tools coming online now that can be absolutely transformative for students' learning. I don't know if any of you have seen some of these things, but they are staggering. From the reducing teacher workload to making it easier for children to take stuff in. So a couple of things that have emerged recently that can help with teaching children and making things more accessible. Things like Microsoft Teams has got learning accelerators, or things that will help to write tasks. So for teachers putting together a lesson, if you're using something like Microsoft Teams, and Google's doing stuff with Gemini now that will do this as well, you can get it to, you can drop in a learning objective and ask it to break it down into simple steps for you automatically. You can ask it to expand on the description you've done automatically. You can ask it to add sparkle, which is a cheesy, incredibly cheesy, but what that will do is put emojis all over everything you've written. And again, is that horribly cheesy? Yes. Is that actually enormously beneficial for some children? Yeah, hugely so. If it helps them to visualize what you're doing. I know it'll be distracting for other children, but I guess it's picking the right things, horses for courses. We've also got things like the learning accelerators down here, which will, you can drop a piece of text in and it will automatically turn it into a verbal reading comprehension. So you drop your text in, it will break it down into a thing that the children have to read. While they're reading it, will identify the words they're on, highlight the words they've struggled with, identify any ones where there are particular barriers. It will give that student and the teacher a summary of words they've got stuck on for an individual and for the whole class. So you can see if there are particular word patterns or things they're particularly finding difficult and break that down. And it will give some feedback on the speaking and listening. Now, obviously, I'm aware that that can be its own barrier. It can be anything we need to work on. I was working on this with a child who has a pretty significant stammer. And we had a conversation beforehand. And actually, she still found it really useful. And there were bits we said, well, I know there are going to be bits where the stammer is going to interfere with you reading this how you want. Ignore the percentages and stuff like that. That's irrelevant. No one's going to get 100% on the reading clarity, but actually you may find some bits in there. And she's noticed that bits have changed in her own reading, and that's been quite helpful. We don't use it a lot, but it's useful. That does that bit, but then it also generates a comprehension with all the questions in it, which you can modify, but it then sets that for the children and then marks it and then gives them feedback instantly and then gives you feedback instantly. And all those things turn something that would have been hours and hours of work and a thing you might do once or twice a year to a thing that you can do in 5 minutes. And that means that it makes it something that's much more accessible. Other things like Suno, which generates music, generates songs. So you can put on, I don't think I shared sound, so I'm not going to play it for you, but you can describe a song that you want. You can give it the lyrics if you want. You can describe the tone. This one I made for Safer Internet Week or Safer Internet Day. One of the children in the assembly said, we were talking about not falling for stuff that gets you in big trouble, and one of them went like a fish that bites, like because it bites a worm and then it's bait and then they've been caught. That's great, sure. And then so we chucked that in and said, sing a sad ballad about a curious fish that gave way too much personal data, and it really engages the children. Another thing is Google Notebook LM, which is staggering and free as well. These are all free, which you drop a comprehension into it. You drop a document into it and it makes a podcast about it. 2 hosts having a chat, takes 2 minutes to generate, makes a 15-minute podcast that you can ask questions of. They will break in for questions, say, oh, we have a question from the audience, and then answer that and then get back to the podcast. That is huge for students who might need to process something separately. You can drop your course notes into it and it makes a podcast that they can basically pause and go back to anytime they like. That's phenomenal. And that's going back, but that's also pre-listening. Voice typing is absolutely huge. I'll come on to that as well. And actually one of those things where we get back to with AI, where people worry about intellectual laziness and worry about overall laziness, if they can just, don't they need to learn how to write? Yes, of course they need to learn how to write, but do they always need to write it? Because actually, if what we're trying to get down to is their understanding, sometimes the writing is a barrier. Writing it down slows them down and prevents them from getting the information in their head out into the world. And if they voice type it, they can do it 20 times faster. And actually, interestingly, where people worry about, yeah, but they won't think about what they're doing, they have to think about it more. Because if it will write out what you say verbatim, you can very quickly see that it's gibberish and have to go back and fix it. And you've got time to do that. Whereas what students will often do when they're writing something down in a rush, because you've got 20 minutes to do it, is they will basically write it out stream of consciousness. And we've asked them to plan it. We expect them to stick to a plan. They ignore the plan. They repeat words. They skip whole bits, it loops round, they lose their punctuation, and actually they are making it up as they go along when they write it down, more so than if they're voice typing it. So that's just another interesting one to think about. Oh no, it is playing. I want to stop it doing this because it's going to play this for hours. Right. I won't play the whole song. I don't know if you can hear that coming through, but away it goes. What I will do is there's a bunch of learning tools. So we have got things like Immersive Reader, which is built into all the Microsoft things that will basically read any old page for you, break it down, highlight words. If you click on a word, it will tell you what the word means and give you a little picture to explain it. You can get it to highlight the nouns and the verbs and all those kinds of things. Incredibly helpful. We can use tools now to give feedback in so many different ways to make it approachable to the children. And we can use things like ChatGPT now for older students, which can do live video. So you can point at the question you're stuck on and it'll talk you through it. Sorry, yes, thank you. The questions about the sound and the music generating one is called Suno, S-U-N-O. And the podcast one is called Google Notebook LM. So that's Notebook Lima Mike, and they're both free. So they are good fun to play with. Under 13s can't use them directly, but you can use them in class to support students, and that's huge. Same thing with the video ChatGPT. That is currently something that only over 13s can use. If you're in a secondary environment, then the over 13s go for it, sort of. And then that brings us on to RileyBot, which is where, background aside, I'm going to move into how are we for time? We are tight for time. This is coming back to an old problem. This graph, which you may have seen over in the corner, is Benjamin Bloom's 2 sigma problem, 1984, but it's where mastery learning comes from. And it's really, he did a study which showed that when children have access to one-to-one support, one-to-one tutoring, they make twice as much progress. And this is not about either or, but this is saying that when they're getting that one-to-one support, they will make twice as much progress as children who are not, which kind of stands to reason. And then mastery learning was the best we could do, given that we are going to be 30 to 1 or 20 to 1 or whatever it is, something to 1. There's a ratio, not 1 to 1. Nothing you can do about it. What can we do? Actually, now there is something we can do. Now we do have AI tools that can give us one-to-one support for students. And that means it pivots suddenly, very quickly, from being well, wouldn't that be nice, but there's nothing we can do about it, to not just being possible, but becoming a responsibility. And I think that's one of those things that's changing now. So I will start this by saying I'll lead with the evidence. I guess one of the things that I get asked a lot and got asked when we were starting is, well, what's the evidence for using AI to support children's learning? And there wasn't any. It was kind of chicken and egg. There wasn't a thing children could use, so there was no evidence about it. So we had to do our own one. So I set up a study working with Impact Ed, and so we could do it properly. And we looked at impact on metacognition, self-efficacy, various other bits and pieces. We weren't looking at do their grades go up, because that is too vague and too difficult to prove. So we did look at how does learning change when you have this on tap. What we then did was we started looking at how you can use this if you put this into the hands of children. So we gave RileyBot to our children in just year 5 and 6 initially. We've now rolled it out to year 3 and year 3 and 4, and rolling out to year 2 in a couple of weeks. And what we looked at, it was 3 main things. The 3 main things that children are using it for is sort of brainstorming and trying to get started on ideas. They're using it for explanation when they're stuck. I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? What does this word mean? Can you do me a word bank? All those bits that should be part of adaptive teaching best practice, but there often isn't time for. And they're also using it for feedback. How am I doing so far? We found a huge impact when children take a photo of their work and drop it in and say, how can I make this better? How am I doing so far? How am I doing against the learning objective? I know I got question 4 wrong, but I don't know why. And what all of that showed us was that this does not replace what a teacher does. It replaces waiting for a teacher. When we looked at the quantity of feedback students got, we saw that the quantity of feedback they got from teachers and their peers did not change. What did change was this 3rd column just appeared, and essentially they got 46% more feedback. And it was in the margins. It wasn't replacing them talking to their teacher. It was replacing them sitting there with their hand up for 5 minutes while their teacher's busy. It replaced them not putting their hand up for a second time because their teacher explained it to them really fast and then had to go and help somebody else and they were still confused. And they didn't have the heart to ask again, or they were too shy to ask in the first place, or they were just interested in something else, or they weren't in the classroom at the time. And all of those things allow them to continue on that. I've got some stats in there. Obviously, this was initial data, but we found rather than becoming over-reliant on the technology and doing nothing, we found they felt more independent because they were less reliant on waiting for a teacher. It gave them an in-between. It gave them more agency in their learning. So they didn't go, either I can work it out for myself or an adult has to do it for me. There is, maybe RileyBot can help me work out how to do it myself. In working with AI, we devised an AI policy, and our policy essentially boils down to three things. It boils down to know how it works, which includes biases and things like that. Be honest when you're using it, and be accountable for what you produce. We gave those requirements to all of our, same policy applies to the adults and the children. And then within that, we want them to be able to go and try stuff out. I won't make you sit through reading through all these things, but what we found was the quality of conversation has changed. The teachers are finding they're spending less time explaining what a word means, or re-explaining the learning objective, or explaining why that was wrong, and getting into some much deeper stuff. We have developed a kind of 4 before me rather than 3 before me, and it kind of goes brain, book, bot, boss. Wait, brain, book, buddy, bot, boss. And go ask somebody else first. Think about it for yourself first. But instead of being stuck, you have this. And that's one of those things that we're working on. It's freed the humans up to human more. It's freed us to work alongside the students more, and it's freed them up to take more charge over their own learning. In terms of what we have on RileyBot itself, it's designed, it looks an awful lot like ChatGPT, but it's designed for children. It has 3 main things that we need to deal with. The safeguarding side. So when children make, it pulls in from the MIS their name and age and send status. And that means that it can respond appropriately to the children for where they are. It pitches it roughly the right age for them, although that can be adjusted up and down. But that's a starting point. So an 8-year-old will get very different feedback from an 18-year-old. Within that, they can voice type. They can just go straight into a full voice mode if typing is a problem, or if reading is a problem. They can adjust the size of the fonts and in fact the style of the fonts, so there are various dyslexia friendly fonts in there. They can change the speed and pitch of the voice. They can adjust the background color and all those different bits and pieces, and they can upload photos of written work or photo of the board. One of the things we've done is like take a photo of the words on the board and say, I don't understand what half of these mean. Can you make me a glossary? And all of those bits that we should, ideally their teachers will be doing. And we really want them to. And frankly, a lot of those teachers will be beating themselves up about not doing it. But most of the time, really properly meeting everybody where they are for every lesson as best you can is a thing that happens when the inspectors come in. And it's not because teachers are lazy, it's because they don't have time. And these things will give that back. That's the idea. And like I said earlier, emoji, because they're nice. That's not by default, but it's really helpful sometimes. We don't give the children an enormous amount of training in how to use it. There is a built-in help screen in there that explains a bunch of things in there, like, I don't understand, can you explain? Is this better? Can you give me feedback? Can you translate this into another language? There was a child who arrived speaking only Chinese at our school, and she picked up basic workable English, but and she has Google Translate for stuff, but there were bits where she put in, how can I explain to my teacher that I'm not sure what to do about this? And she had a chat with it to establish what it was that she wanted to say before the actual direct literal translation. And that kind of thing is really helpful. On the support end, that's a lot of it. But beyond the support end, there's also the extension end. And again, extension isn't, I mean, again, you will know this more than me, right? That having barriers to learning is not the same as not being good at learning, and not having passions and curiosities and abilities to absolutely fly in some areas, even if other areas are barriers. And to be able to take the brakes off and let children access things in different ways now that they have these tools, it's meaning that we're reappraising the way we do a lot of things. I'm starting to change some of the ways I do my schemes of work. We're doing a trial now where we're going to give the children access to all the learning objectives at the start of term, and do a kind of flipped learning bit for those children who find, like, what a horrible disadvantage to a lot of children that children who might struggle with change, or might struggle with unpredictability, or might need processing time, that they walk into the room and then we spring the learning on them. And we do that per force, because we've got 1 hour to teach this, and then 1 hour to teach this, and then 1 hour to teach this. But it's that transition period is so stressful for so many children, and so many of them are just starting to engage with it by the time we kick them out of the room and say, go do something else now. And if we can give them that stuff in advance, if we can let them have it after the lesson, if we can say, and I will say to some of my children now, look, you've got all the learning objectives, you've got RileyBot. If you want to carry on, go for it. If you're stuck on something from last week, I will come back to work with you, or another adult might be able to. But in the meantime, have a chat with RileyBot about it. See if we can address some of that. And often it makes a huge difference for their confidence going forward into their next lessons and into the things that are coming up. It allows us to do things differently. Which then brings us on to the tools. I guess this is a lot. Some of you have already been at an AI conference earlier today. There's an awful lot going on there. There are huge amounts to put in. Where do I start? It's huge, it's terrifying. I guess where RileyBot again is useful is there are a lot of specialist tools out there that do a lot of things brilliantly. This is a general tool. This is a general access tool for children to support curiosity, to extend, to support explanation. And the main bit of training we're really giving to staff about this is saying, let them use it. We need to teach them how to use it safely, but we want our children, what are schools for? Schools are places to prepare children to be functioning human beings in the world. And some of that is teaching reading, writing, and maths, but a lot of that is teaching life skills. And that includes digital, it includes living in in a world in which AI is increasingly important for doing anything. And we may have all sorts of feelings about that, but it doesn't make it not real. In the same way that roads exist and cars are on roads. And we teach our children to be safe crossing roads, not by shutting them in the house and showing them a video about how roads are dangerous and then kicking them out the door at 18. And in fact, as I was talking to Annabelle earlier, it's worse than that, because it's not like they do wait until they're 18 to leave the house. They're going out of the house every day anyway, into a world in which this stuff's around. So our job is to teach them how to do it safely. We hold their hand and we cross the road with them. And we have these tools that have these safeguards. So when their child asks for help with their learning, it goes up and is processed and anonymized and tokenized. For RileyBot, it's not retained by an AI company. They don't use it for training. They don't keep the child's data, but they do store on UK servers to give the teacher an overview. The teacher has a dashboard to see the child, every child in their class's conversations going back 30 days. Parent can see their own child's conversations going back 30 days if their child's under 13, and the child can too. And then the last layer is a teacher voice. So if a child asks ChatGPT to do their work for them, it will. If a child asks RileyBot to do their work for them, it will say, no, but tell me what your work is. Let me help you with that. If I'm not going to do your essay for you, but I'll help you to structure it. And having that back and forth where they see it as a conversation rather than a machine that does their work for them is so beneficial in the metacognitive side of children developing those skills of talking about their learning and talking through it. So really we see it as a tool. We see it as, in my school, we have it as a thing. The iPad lives on the desk and the child has that handy like the rest of their pencil case. And we say, you've got your pencil case, use the right tool when you need the right tool. And to our staff, we say, don't lock the rulers in the ruler drawer. Have the tools available and teach your children how to use them properly. Teach them when it's not the right time. But then we need to give them that agency and give them that confidence to choose the right tools, because that's what they are going to need for life. And that is my 30 minutes. I'm sorry I haven't left any official time for questions. I don't know if we cut off automatically at this point or if anybody would like to jump in.
We don't cut off automatically. Yeah, so does anybody have any questions for Lex? That was really interesting, Lex. I'm just wondering if there are free demos. Do you know if there are free demos?
Yes, sorry, yeah. So if you go onto the Sphinx AI website, which is so if you Google Sphinx AI or RileyBot, and if you get in touch with them, they can organize free trials. It's useful to get your ducks in a row first. We had a couple of schools sign up for a free trial and then realize near the end that they needed to get parental permission, and then their trial finished before they'd done that. So have a chat with them about it. They're really good about that. They've got you. There are like permission letters they can give you to send out and all that kind of stuff. Pricing wise as well, I'm not in charge of any of this because I don't even work for them, but they it's about £2-3 a month per child.
I'll have to wait till this logs off.
Well,
usually I can.
Sorry, there's a little bit of noise behind me. Bear, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry. We've talked a lot about AI today and a lot about data protection and everything.
Yeah.
You mentioned it really quickly, and I'm not sure I caught about like where is the data stored? Is it GDP compliant?
Yes.
GDPR, sorry.
Yes.
Just the legal side and the safe side for the students once they put their data on. Where does it go? Is it safe? Is it closed?
Yeah. So yes is the short answer. So the legal team worked closely. Originally, it was built on top of the ChatGPT model with OpenAI, and then the legal team went back and forth with them. And in the end, they weren't prepared to give the assurances that we wanted. But Anthropic, who make Claude, were. So the way it works is that when a child sends off their query, it goes up to them. It's anonymized and tokenized, goes up, gets processed, and then gets deleted off their server immediately. They don't feed it into their model for training. They don't retain it at all. They send it straight back. That said, it goes via a filtering model. So that means it will pick up anything that is of concern. And that doesn't just mean swear words. It means, like, because it's going through a language model, it's tone. If they sound really sad or really angry, if they sound really frustrated, it will automatically send an email to your safeguarding leads with a link to the specific conversation and a summary of the conversation and the context. So it doesn't just say swearing and then link to it. It will say, during a conversation about the First World War, this child was researching types of weaponry, and that's probably lower down the triage list than if it said a child was talking about revenge because somebody was teasing them in a club, and then that's something you're going to want to get into. And so it will give you that summary. Where that is stored is it's stored in the UK on Microsoft Azure servers. So that again is like kind of military grade encryption, and that is retained for 30 days so that the teacher can see all the conversations on a dashboard and get to the flagged messages. Parent can see their own child's conversation, and the child can see their own chat history to get to things that they've worked on. And then after 30 days, those conversations drop off the list and are then deleted as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And you say it's Claude, the GTP?
Yeah, so the language model it's using is based on Claude, but they've got a bespoke model of it that is, fully GDPR compliant, and has been trained to respond in a UK education setting, I guess.
Thanks.
Wow, well, it will be interesting to demo it.
Sorry, I've got another one. Before we go, your slide was very interesting, and I was quite taken by the fact that it was interactive and I could click and activate your audio content and video.
I didn't realize I'd done that. Cool.
You didn't realize it was? Yeah, it's the first time I see that. So I was wondering if you did know how you did that, because normally you see a Teams presentation and you wait for the presenter to click and activate the video, but actually I could do that myself. And you weren't aware that I was doing it, so.
I when I went to share my screen, I thought I would try to directly share the presentation, which is a thing they include. So it lets you directly share it, and I guess allows interactivity. That's interesting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Cool. That's exciting.
Cheers.
I wasn't sure absolutely how that worked because I've never tried it before, but I'm a sucker for a new button, and I will.
Well, there you go.
It's exciting. All right. Well, does anybody else have any questions for Lex? I can see we're getting on towards 4:10. So if nobody else has any questions, we might leave it there.
If anyone else has any follow-ups at another time, then please do drop me an email, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm going to say it now, rubbish on LinkedIn, but I will get there eventually. Like within a month or two of you sending a message, I will get back to you. There are ways, or anything that's specific about Sphinx and RileyBot and trials and stuff, go to Sphinx. If it's about AI stuff generally, then give me a shout.
Lex, also, I'm not sure if you know about our Communication Works event, which is on the 22nd of May.
Yes,
I've been talking to Sphinx AI about it, and they're coming along, and I just thought it might be something that you might be interested in coming along too. I mean, obviously it's on the a school day, so you might not be able to, but I might send you some information about it.
It's one I can't come to myself, but I know somebody from my school is going.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good.
From our senior school.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much. That was really interesting. And yeah, I'll be sharing the recording for those people who couldn't make it live. Thanks very much, Lex. And thank you,
so much
everybody.
for having me. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.